You're now listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene. You're listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Today we are going to talk about Stories From. Is an initiative founded by Simon John Williams. He's a lecturer and he will share with us about the books that he has published and the stories that he has gathered from minority groups. First of all, welcome to the studio.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Share with us your background and also the books that you have published.
Well, my background is I'm from the UK originally, and I've been living in Asia for about 10, 11 years now, 7 years in Japan, 4 or 5 years in Malaysia. I'm a lecturer, and a couple of years ago, with some of my co-workers, we started Stories From, to tell stories from a local community perspective.
Oh. And at that time, there's not many books about local issues or local communities' perspective.
Yeah, I think so.
Prompted you to, ask your student to write about it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole project started as a simple class project where I just wanted my students to leave the confines of the classroom and to visit a local community to kind of help out in any way they could, and then collect some of the stories from them. So we never really expected to have a book published by ourselves from it, but that's where it kind of naturally snowballed in that direction. We didn't say, okay, next week let's do this, or next month let's do this. It was a natural progression. So we followed the story. The story didn't follow us each time. So it was interesting how it turned out.
So the first stories that was collected is the story of the disabled kids, right?
The first stories was Almost Home, and that was the stories from the refugee community. Yeah. After we finished that, and we all had a lot of fun on that. We loved collaborating with all the local writers and designers. There's like 100 people in total. And we thought, let's just keep going. And then immediately after, we started with a new project. My coworker Michelle works a lot with two communities. One is called Shuang Fu, another one's called Orchids. And then we approached this community and said if we could meet them and kind of collect their stories, and they agreed to. And we had another marvelous year just working with them and creating the next book then as well. So it just keeps snowballing now. And now we're thinking about our next projects and the current project as well.
So a lot of the initiatives are very grassroots and happen just like that, and people just coming in and volunteer. How did you manage to get many people to join in the bandwagon?
Oh, I don't know. It's interesting actually because I'm not sure, because I think when you have a project that is meaningful and it's something that they can be a part of, I think people are interested to be involved in it, So when I put up the stories, the first and the second book, saying we're looking for people to help us adapt the stories from the refugee community or the special needs community, I think it kind of struck a nerve with some people that they'd like to be part of that. They like the idea of working as part of a team and working toward a central goal. It's not like we're just raising money for a charity, because after the money's been raised, it kind of goes away. But because we're working towards a book, like something that it's tactile and they can see, I think people like that, and everyone's working towards one goal. So it's been really humbling to kind of see how many people have volunteered their services, have helped out for free, because no one gets paid for what we're doing. We all do it because we are just interested in the stories, and we're interested to be part of a team, I think, is probably the key element of it.
And the idea started in 2013 when you asked your students to write about these stories. But it was only published last year in 2014. It took you 1 year to get from idea to an actual book being published. How was the process?
It usually starts with we identify the community. That takes about a month to meet the right people, set up meetings, and of course we want to make sure that the community leaders and the community members are happy to tell their stories, because some people don't want to tell their stories. That takes about a month. The next stage
is persuade them.
Well, not persuade them, but just see if they want to be part of it. We don't want people to be forced into it. It's something that they want to tell themselves, and I think that's very, very. The most important part is just trust, and that initial trust network. After that, we go and collect the stories, which could take between a month or 2 months, depending on how many stories. Then adapting the stories takes another 2 months. And then, because all our members are working for free, so they still have full-time jobs, families, lives. So we need to give them enough time to kind of work on it. Then another 2 months then for the illustrators to come in and to help illustrate everything.
Was it an initial idea to get illustrators to come in?
No, just kind of someone suggested it. Oh, you should illustrate that. We're like, I don't know any illustrators. Like, oh, I think I know someone. Let me ask someone.
Yes, because some of the, a lot of the things that are being drawn here are really interesting and kind of match to the age group that you are targeting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how the illustrators have kind of interpreted the stories, because it's been interpreted like a few different ways, because we transcribe the interview, so that's how the storyteller interprets their own story. Then the writers have to interpret that story through their own kind of thought process, and then the illustrators have to interpret the writer's thought process. So it's been interpreted 3 times. So I hope that the heart of the story is still there, but it is quite complicated. It gets quite tricky down the line.
But after the book was being published, you mentioned off air that one of the hardest part is to actually sell it or to actually market it to others. Reading is already a challenge in Malaysia. As you all know, there was a research conducted a couple of years ago that Malaysians only read like 2 pages a year. Oh. and to get people, especially Malaysia, to read is one of the hardest challenges for any book writer. What is your strategy?
That's a great question, and I will figure that out soon.
What have you utilized so far?
It's in terms of sales and trying to convince people to read it, it's just direct sales. It's friends of friends of friends of friends. Again, utilizing social media, WhatsApp groups.
It's very MLM.
Yeah, it's all the way. It's completely grassroots as you can kind of go. Because, as you said, it's difficult to convince people to read something because a lot of the books out there have huge marketing budgets. And now I truly realize why films and products spend so much money on advertising, because I see how hard, and as I mentioned before, it's comparatively speaking, it's easy to make the book compared to selling it. Selling it is really, really hard. Of course, people are interested in the community as well, but reading about the community is a little bit different. It's easy to like something on Facebook and then kind of forget about it and say you're part of that community, but until you kind of read about it, it's a different story. So, but I think each time that we kind of release a book, the same people come back to buy it again, and hopefully they recommend it to someone else. So it's the classic word of mouth marketing strategy that's worked for us so far, and I think that's how it will continue.
Did they change the thinking of your students after they embark on the project?
Yes, it was.
I see any changes in them?
Yeah, I did. I'm a researcher as well, so I kind of did a little bit of I asked the students to write a reflective essay after they finished the project, because I wanted them to kind of reflect on the experience, not just on learning, but on how they kind of perceived what they just done. And it was interesting to see that the students felt I think they understood themselves better. Because I remember one of the students wrote that I went to the school to teach something to these kids, but actually they taught me something about myself. So I think it was a great kind of eye-opening experience, and for some of the students to kind of feel like it's not just me and my family in my insular kind of world now. There is a bigger place out there with people that are way, way, way different from me. And even though I see these things on social media and on the news, until I'm face-to-face with it, it doesn't really exist.
A lot of people say that the Millennial Generation, or even the younger generation in general, they are quite apathetic towards people outside their social circle. But in your students, were they previously, before the classroom project that you had, were they quite, I guess, not in the know what's happening out there?
I have to think back when I was 18, and I didn't know that much when I was 18 either. But I think it's given people the opportunity to work on these projects. Because when I saw these kids who come from, comparatively like well-off areas, but when they went to meet people with special needs and they were refugees, initially they were a little bit apprehensive about meeting these people, but very, very, very quickly they warmed up and they became very comfortable with it, and it was a changing experience for them. So I think I don't think it's our kids are more apathetic towards things, but I think just by watching something on YouTube or by reading something on a website doesn't do it, because we're humans and we need that contact, that human-to-human contact. So I think it's creating opportunities for our students to go out and engage with people.
Was this the first time they actually meet people from refugees living in Malaysia? Because their first project was Almost Home, which was about refugee kids.
Yeah, I think for many of them, and for a lot of my students who are actually Malaysian, they never had any idea that there were any refugees living here.
Really?
And they're Malaysian, so it's, again, unless you go and meet the people, it doesn't really exist, it's on a TV screen, it's on your phone, it's on a computer, but you have to meet these people. I think that's the important part. But after I saw these kids meet these people and engage with them, I kind of saw them open up and then have feelings and emotion, and that project then became meaningful for them. But I think it's about connectivity and getting people to connect with others. It's nice to connect over Skype with people in other countries, but we need to see
the physical contact.
Yeah, and to have that be in that space between them. Because if it's online, you've always got that kind of security blanket where you can switch off when you want to. But if you're meeting someone face to face who's in a wheelchair and you don't know what to say, you have to kind of react. Or a refugee person who's living in the country with a traumatic story, you have to be able to react. You can't just switch off or fast forward, So I think we make our kids apathetic because we just say, just watch this documentary and it's fine. But we need to engage our children more in the local communities, because that's where they should be.
That's true. Anyway, we'll take one short break.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene. You're back with me again. Of course, you are with the founder of the Stories From initiative. He's also a lecturer, Simon John Williams. So earlier on, we talked about how your students were inspired by the classroom projects, and eventually it became stories where you publish it into a book. But what are the stories on the ground that has somehow changed your own perspectives about minorities that are living in Malaysia?
I think, it's interesting because I thought by doing this, I thought this project would change my kids, but I think it changed me more. It made me see that even though I read up about refugee rights and rights for special needs people, I don't really do anything other than that. So what this project taught me was actually to get involved with these communities. And what I've learned from the communities is the incredible strength that they have and the resilience that they have in order to just live each day. I think the main thing I learned is people don't want to be a refugee. People don't necessarily want to be in a wheelchair, but they live that life, and that's what they continue with each day. And I don't think we need to feel sorry for these people in a way. We just need to offer our help when it's needed. So the stories have kind of really opened my eyes a little bit more. When you meet these people, you see the strength that they have, and probably the biggest thing I've learned is they're just like us.
They live the same kind of
life. I think it's sometimes people have like an us and them, or that's that group and that's a different group, but we're all the same at the end of the day. It doesn't matter which country we're from or what special needs we have. We all have the same emotions. We're all happy some days, angry the next days, happy, whatever the next day is. But that's what I learned, is we're all the same. And I think hopefully the stories show people that these people still go through tough times, but they also have fun days as well. They enjoy themselves sometimes too.
So it's not all sad stories in the book.
No, I didn't want to just focus on the negative side of it, because I think a lot of times we focus on the negatives of being in a different community, but at the same time I wanted to show that as well, because that was important, but show that these people have lives as well. They have successes in their life. They have happy days and they have fun days. They have things that go wrong, and they have things that go right as well. It's not just one sad story. It's a whole spectrum of different things.
But why do you think it's important to tell all these stories to the public?
I think that a lot of the stories that we tell are from our local community, but we just tend to, because it's in our local community, we tend to not ignore it, but we don't really see it. We don't see the forest for the trees because it's there.
Well, whenever we hear story, it's always based on our perspective of the story rather than from their perspectives.
It's true, yeah. So it's interesting to see that. I mean, we've had to kind of interpret the stories and to a certain extent, and the writers have done a fantastic job, but I hope we've kept the story that the storytellers want to tell. And I think that in our local communities, there are lots of stories around us every day that sometimes we don't, I know if we don't listen to it, or we don't really pay attention to it, or we don't go and look for it because we look at other places for our stories, because life is a big story.
That's true.
I think, isn't it? But I think our community is full of interesting stories for us to tell, whether they're from the special needs community, the refugee community, or, as I said before, the elderly community. These people have a wealth of stories to share with us, and they can be really fascinating as well.
And you want to move beyond just telling stories about the refugees and the disabled to expand it to other stories out there. What are the stories that you are working on right now?
We're hoping to tell the stories of people from the Orang Asli community. So I'd love to be able to show the life that they have and the life that they lead. Other than that, it's stories from the elderly community as well. I mean, the people who are around 60 plus, 70, 80 years old with an amazing life of fantastic stories that I think would inspire. And especially
the history of Southeast Asia.
Yeah, interesting.
Colorful.
Isn't it? To know a story from someone who's maybe 80 years old now, but from their life when they were 15, and how Malaysia has changed over that time, or what they used to do when they were kids. Because all our lives are the same. We have different generations, we have different technological advances, but the same things happen each time. We have boyfriend and girlfriend problems, we have fights, we have arguments, we have happy days, but the same stories are told and again in a different era or context. So I hope that we can tell stories from the elderly community, the Orang Asli, the LGB community, trafficked community, which would be really sad but really interesting to hear their stories, and then other communities outside of that, from the maids, the service workers, the workers who come to work on the construction sites, urban poor as well, and anyone else who has a strong community centre, which would be really interesting.
But why do you think that it's important to tell stories, to share voices from communities that are not being heard by the mainstream communities?
I'm realistic. I know that a lot of people are not going to read the book. It's not like Harry Potter, and we're going to reach millions of people, but I do hope that for some people it does touch them and inspire them in a way, or just makes them realize that the community is a very important place. And these stories, I think, redefine or help to define our community even stronger. And it's almost like a little history book of our communities, because our communities are changing so rapidly, aren't they?
Yeah, with globalization, I think more and more the idea of nation state is going to reduce to nothing, and people can cross border easily, and you have cross border issues, for example refugee issues, but when it comes to these minorities, is it easy to actually get them to sit down and talk to you guys?
I think so. As I said before, the important part is just meeting the community leaders first, and that because these communities are small and they don't have a large voice like other communities, I think it's more of a risk for them to tell their story. But what we found is a lot of people want to tell their story. They want people to know more about this kind of community that they're part of. So it's important to work closely with the community leaders and the members of the community to make sure that they understand that we're doing this project and this will be the outcomes and the goals, and to make sure that they're actually happy to do so as well, because we don't want anyone to be forced to tell their story, So first, the trust part is really important, and then just going in and creating the rapport with the person firstly, and then just getting to know them a little bit as well, helps the person to open up and then really tell their story. But we found that people just want to tell their story. Everyone wants to tell their story.
I think for so long they have been unheard of. Yeah. But what are the feedback that you get from your readers?
I mean, I think the people who read the books actually like the stories themselves, and it may not be like a grandiose action film story, you know, but it's from the people that read it, they say that it's nice to read a story that's grounded and a story that's based in it could be a street or 2 streets away from where they live, and that kind of grounded reality story I think is really interesting for the people who read it. And for some people they may feel inspired, for other people they might feel sad, and it creates a different range of emotions for everyone who actually reads it.
And it's interesting as well, because most of the time, especially for school-going kids, usually we would read stories that are Western-centric, especially in English language. Very rarely when students actually get hold of stories that comes from their own community.
Yeah, and one of the kind of impetuses for the project itself was my coworker said he wanted his daughter to read stories that had a more Malaysian feel, because his daughter was always watching films about a prince coming to save this, or from a Western perspective,
or reality TV.
Yeah, but I hope that these stories show that there's a hero. There are lots of superheroes around that have these amazing stories, and they might be a young girl, they might be an older lady, they might be a teenage boy, or like an older man. But I think these stories help people from a local community see what the people that are actually there, and I think that's why they were kind of interesting for me anyway. Maybe it's just a selfish endeavor that I just for me I just love hearing people's stories.
Yeah, me too actually.
Yeah, I think largely it's just the people who work is just a selfish endeavor that we just love meeting people that from different communities, learning about them, and just hearing their story, and then hopefully sharing it, and hopefully someone else likes it. But at the end of the day, we're going to keep doing it because we like meeting these people and sharing their stories. Maybe it's just a completely selfish project that we're doing.
Anyway, we'll take another one short break. When we return, we'll discuss further on stories from the initiative that to highlight the voices from the unheard communities.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
So welcome back. This is Arlene. Of course, you are with me and Simon John Williams, lecturer as well as founder of Stories From Initiative. So, talking about the books that you have written, and you also currently is writing and going to publish another book. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, we've decided to go back to the refugee community again.
This is a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal at the moment, yeah. And a lot of people that I met and work with are really interested to go back to this community to tell their stories, and I feed off their enthusiasm for it. So we started work on this, I don't know, probably late last year, just to kind of start planning it. And we collected about 20 to 30 stories, and we kind of moved it down into kind of like the best 16. And we've had them adapted by amazing local writers in Malaysia, and designed by some really talented young illustrators as well. The book's called Dawn of a New Sky.
Dawn of a New Sky.
Yeah, so we're in the kind
why the title is like that?
I'm not sure actually. It's I'd like to say there's a huge meaning behind it, but I mean, the first book, Almost Home, was significant because it's the refugee community are not home. They're almost in a place where they want to live. And the next book about special needs is As Life Found Me. I thought the title was quite appropriate as well, because that's how life found them. Dawn of a New Sky, if I want to kind of create something for it, I hope it's a hopeful title, I think, for the book. It's not too depressing. So I think a lot of times the book has a very kind of depressing theme with it. But I hope a dawn of a new sky means that each person's story will have a new dawn in their own new sky, whether their sky is above Malaysia, whether their sky is above Australia or above the UK. I hope they find that dawn one day. But yeah, we've got 16 stories, and we're just in the final stages of compilation at the moment.
So the 16 stories are from perspective from the refugee kids or refugee adults?
Mostly kids. I'd say from the ages of 12 to 18 years old. And they come from 3 communities, one from the Somali community, the other one from the Myanmar community, another community of a community learning center made up of Afghan, Iranian, and Pakistan.
So it's quite unbelievable that refugees from different countries that are residing in Malaysia, I think a lot of Malaysians might not be aware of, for them to journey all the way to Malaysia. Do they see Malaysia as the pit stop to another country, or do they see Malaysia as the dawn of a new sky?
Ooh, good question. It's difficult to say, and it would be unfair for me to answer that question because I'm not really sure. I think it's a big spectrum. For some people, it's just an escape from where they were living. It's better than their home country. For maybe other people, it's a stop before somewhere else. And maybe for other people, it's their new sky. So I think there's a broad range of reasons, but it'd be really unfair for me to answer that.
But most of the stories are their experiences living in Malaysia, or their stories from their country of origin?
It's kind of a mix, actually. It's a mix of their life before they came here, their journey on the way as they came here. I've met one girl from Somalia who actually lived in China.
Oh, wow.
Which I was like, that's interesting. I didn't even know there were any...
And she can speak Chinese, I suppose.
She lived there for a year, she said. And the interesting fact was, I was like, but what did you eat when you went to China? Because there's a lot of things, it's difficult to find halal food, I suppose, for many things. And she's like, I actually became vegetarian when I was in China, because it was the easiest way. And I was like, are you vegetarian now? I said, yeah, I'm still vegetarian now. I was like, even in Malaysia? She's like, yeah, I'm still a vegetarian now. I was like, interesting. So there's little kind of nuggets, I think, that you can only get if you go and meet people. So it's... Yeah, the community, the refugee issue is always going to be very contentious, I think, in every country that we go to. I'm from the UK, and it's still a very kind of hot topic at the moment. But
yeah, in Europe especially.
Yeah, and it's and I'm not qualified to answer on any side of it. But from a personal side, it's interesting to meet people that have a different life from mine. It's interesting to engage with them and talk to them and hear their stories. Because quickly when you start talking and hear their stories, they don't become refugees anymore, they become people. And I think that's a key, I think, in just that, again, connecting with people.
According to statistics, there's a rise of xenophobic sentiments towards refugees and migrant workers. So do you think through the book itself, it can somehow normalize the idea that refugees are just as human as us?
I hope so. I hope that I think everyone that reads the book, whether it's about the refugee community or the special needs community, will take something different from it. But the one hope that I have from all the communities that we work with is they understand them a little bit more. So next time you meet someone from that community, you're a little bit more knowledgeable about it, not so quick to judge, and not so quick to believe everything you see or read online, you know? So whether the books are able to normalize that community, I'm not sure. It would be impossible to say, but I just hope it allows people it gives people an insight into that community, because the more you know about a community, the less unusual or scary it becomes, you know.
But what were the misconceptions that people have, or at least your student might have, before they interview the refugee kids, or before some of the volunteers interviewed the disabled community?
It was interesting because for my kids, they didn't have any opinions either way, because they didn't have any information about it. What they knew was limited to something they might have seen occasionally on the news. And some kids did have experience working with special needs communities in their home countries, but for the large part, there was no bias, there was no prejudice, actually, which was interesting because they hadn't encountered that community
before. So they come with a very blank
mind. Kind of a blank mind. Of course, there was apprehension about doing something different, I think. But it was interesting because a lot of these kids are quite 17, 18 years old. They didn't come into they didn't go to the community with any kind of preconceived negative ideas about that community, because they haven't been exposed to that yet. So it's interesting that I don't know where we get these negative ideas from.
With the media, I suppose.
But yeah, at that younger age, it's nice to see that they hadn't been, I don't want to say corrupted yet, but they hadn't been kind of washed with kind of negative. At least now they can form their own opinion. And if it's negative, it's negative. If it's positive, it's positive. If it's neutral, it's neutral. But at least they can say, I've actually been to that community. I know about it a little bit more now, and I can make a more informed decision about what I'm reading and what I'm seeing online.
About the book, The Dawn in a New Sky, when will it be out?
At the moment, we're crowdfunding, so we're starting a new funding cycle. So at the moment, we've got pre-sales available on our website, which is storiesfrom.io. So if you're interested to learn more about the project, or even come and help us support come and help us fund the project at the moment, please visit the website and find out more about us. We also have a Facebook page. It's Facebook/Community Stories, where you can find out more about our past projects and our present project as well. So just help us support it, because that's what we're doing now is just creating funding just to kind of print, because no one gets paid in Stories From. The only expense we have is printing the book, and that's the only thing.
And what about the 2 books that you have published? How can people get hold of it?
Same again, through our website, and we don't have many copies left, unfortunately. Well, no, fortunately, or unfortunately, I'm not really sure. Fortunately, we don't have many left because we managed to sell a lot of them now, but if they're interested to get a copy, they can just contact us through our website, and we'd be happy to post it to them right away. It's all, so far, we're all word of mouth, grassroots project, so direct sales to people.
And you also have a Facebook page, right?
Yeah, Community Stories. So just go Facebook/Community Stories, and that's our Facebook page. And you'll find all our updates and past projects and things.
And what are the pricing?
The Almost Home and As I Found Me are 20 ringgit each. So what usually happens is from the 20 ringgit, half goes back to the community, then we keep half to fund the next project. With the new book, Dawn of a New Sky, it's priced at 25 ringgit. But there's also a special option, which is 95 ringgit, which if you pledge 95 ringgit, we'll put your name nicely in a nice font in our book as well, so you'll be featured in our book.
That's amazing. Will you be holding any panel session, reading session?
I hope so, yes. As soon as we finalize the funding, and we know when we can kind of get printing started, hopefully at the end of this year, we hope to get it printed by then, if we raise our funding targets. And then probably around about the same time or early next year, we'll have a launch party with readings and an exhibition as well.
Will it be available in local bookstores?
Yes, hopefully. So yes, we're just finalizing that kind of deal at the moment. So yeah, look out for us. Keep following us on our website, storiesfrom.io, and our Community Stories Facebook page for all the latest updates.
Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you very much too.